Welcome into Flyover Footy on the big YouTube/Instagram/X.
Did we do 10 seconds last time? Or is it shorter?
No, I
again?
shortened it. I shortened it.
so.
Did you like that?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay, good. I think 10 seconds is.
Oh, what happened?
I left my audio on and the Instagram window and the other tab was open.
That reminds me to mute my stuff.
We can still use the excuse of preseason form.
That's true. Yeah. Notice that's why I was thinking of the segments and things. I was like, I need to tighten it up a little bit. Let's get my shit together.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll give everybody a chance to join up since I hyped. This was like the only pod recording that we've done where I've actually hyped up folks joining right at 8:30. And we did fairly well for ourselves in going live at 8:31. I think that's a little better than what we usually do. So give everybody a chance to join because we're going to have our giveaway very quickly. That's going to kick off our show before we start our podcast recording. So this is a live stream exclusive giveaway, courtesy of our friend over at STL Soccer News. And it's kind of with the intent of not just getting somebody who doesn't have the chance into City Live, or who missed out on the ticket opportunity because of how quickly they sold out, but also kind of using that as a way to come hang out with us here on Thursday night. We always stream on Thursday at 8:30. We have no plans of changing that this season. So whether you want to mark your calendar or just know that we're always going to be here, 8:30 Thursdays, all throughout the city season, it's flyover time.
Aaron Leake's on a plane, he says.
Oh,
and that's
snap.
Incredible.
That's fantastic. Thanks for joining us in the skies. That's cool.
I'm debating in my head, am I allowed to make a Mile High joke?
We're not recording for the pod yet, so you're allowed to do. I mean, we've elevated the rating up to like TVMA possibly for the stream.
For the stream,
yeah,
that's fine.
We'll dial it back because of our radio friends. Once we do the pod, that is. All right. Yeah. So we've got a pretty compact show. So while everybody's joining up and we get prepped for this giveaway, we have some news to start off with. We'll get into some USSF, MLS versus NASL lawsuit info pretty quickly. We got some roster rules that broke, and we'll be able to highlight all of those changes. And then we've got a fun touting for a city youth national team call up. We can look forward to Lorenzo Cornelius wearing the stars and stripes. And then we've got a ton on city, Coachella, match one details. And while I don't think we're going to dig into a lot of like the tactics of the first match necessarily, but I don't know about you, Phil. I saw a ton that we can take away that we've been hearing about from the first two games that we saw in the third game that we're probably going to be expecting to see in the fourth, fifth, and sixth games.
Yep. Yeah. A lot to talk about. How meaningful they are. Of course, we got to pump our brakes on that, but it is so much fun that we get to talk about it. So that's what I'm looking most forward to tonight, personally.
All right. Well, since I hyped 8:30, I don't want to put it off for too long. If folks are interested in the giveaway, I think they're probably here. I am watching on Instagram over here as well. So if you've got us pulled up on Instagram, use that chat as well to get involved in this before we go live on our pod, because here's our giveaway. We've got a couple. So here's what I'm trying to do. I want to make this kind of first to get the answer. So speed is a factor in your answers. So get your hands at your keyboard. But the other fact is I want to make this a little fair. And so we're going to do the first, depending on how many people get this very quickly, we're going to do the first 3 or 5 people to get the answer, kind of move on to the final round, so to speak. But if nobody gets the answer, maybe it'll just be the first person to get it, and we'll see how that goes. I'm gonna say the question, and then we're not gonna speculate too much. We'll kind of take a pregnant pause for a second and see what the chat ends up throwing up at us. So here it is. You guys are ready? We're 5 minutes into the stream now. For the 2 free tickets to City Live on February 16th, courtesy of our friend Chris Gebhart with STL Soccer News, because we know that when you have free tickets, you tend to go for those, and then life happens, and that's what happened in this case. So we had somebody buy tickets, and life took them away, not able to make this event. So that's why we have this, thanks to Chris with STL Soccer News. So here is the trivia question. Which city player currently with the club in Coachella is the most tenured as far as when they were announced as a signing? Let that sink in, because those words were intentional. Which city player currently with the club in Coachella is the most tenured as far as when they were announced as a signing? And if you want to just like throw a name out, feel free to do that. Like I said, if only one person answers this correctly, then you're going to win the tickets. If we get 2, 3, 4, or 5 that I see correct, then we'll have a fun little second round, which is a more specific stats-based trivia question.
Is Abba right? I thought it was that answer.
I'm seeing a couple. Nope, that's not correct.
Darn it.
We shouldn't say it's not correct yet, because, gotta let some people answer.
Well, there's a delay, so actually it's probably pretty safe. I have a backup answer.
And I've got a specific reason why that's not the case either.
So there's some trickery going on.
There is some trickery going on here.
From you, Matt.
There is some trickery going on.
Oh, it looks like it's too difficult.
It was a pretty hard one. I was kind of wavering on this. I was hoping one person at least would get it.
So since it's a little bit off, can we give them a hint? If I'm right, like, should we be? This person has been part of announced longer than Yarrow. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Never mind. So now I'm not sure my backup is correct either. I think we got to call it.
Okay. We do have a correct answer, though.
Oh, we do?
Mm-hmm. Correct answer is Colin in the chat. Tomas Ostrak is the most tenured player who is announced as a St. Louis City signing currently at Coachella.
Oh, I got it now. Is it because Yarrow was a City 2 signing?
It is correct. Yarrow was a City 2 signing, and they never officially announced him in press release fashion they never released any announcement that he was assigned to City 2 with an option for City. They referenced a 1-1 or a 1 year with an option. They referenced that, and we all took it to mean certain things. And if you talked to some people, it meant a certain thing, and it ended up meaning a certain thing, that City 2 and then City. But he was never announced before Selmer Pedro as having a St. Louis City contract. The announcements started with Selmer Pedro, and the club has said this in the past, that Selmer Pedro was the first announced signing to St. Louis City. And if you dig back into the archives on City's website, because I did this just to check myself, you'll see the original announcements of players for the first team. It was Lutz first. I think Carnell was the next announcement. It was Selmer Pedro and then Tomas Ostrak.
Wow.
Yeah. Congrats, Colin. Colin, reach out to any of our socials, and we'll get you set up with those 2 City Live tickets. I appreciate that. Great answer.
Question, Matt. Really good one.
It's tricky, yeah, because you wouldn't. So first of all, Yarrow, we all think of him as the oldest because he was signed to City 2 as the first external signing. And then Edu Leuven, Klaus, Bürki, I was expecting to see some answers. Bigger names, but Ostrak predates all of them as far as when he was announced.
I was pretty sure this was, no, I just wasn't thinking. I think Perez was signed late, like mid-season or something.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was wondering. But I was like, maybe he was signed early as an academy player and announced as a
no,
something.
Caden Glover was the first homegrown signing.
You're right.
Miggy Perez's contract came after Caden Glover's.
I forgot that too. Okay.
Crazy. For the fun of it, the second question would have been if more than one person hadn't answered or had answered correctly. The second question would have been, who led City in goals per 90 last year? Any guesses on that one, Phil?
I was going to say Celio or wait, no, in the whole last year, you said.
Yeah, for the goals per 90 with no minimum appearances required. That's a hint right there.
Yeah. I'm going to guess wrong because I was going to say Toy Shirt. You fixed that. I need to get used to saying Toy Shirt. Who is it? We let people do some guesses.
Brandon got it. Brandon on X.
It is Betcher?
It was Simon Betcher. Simon Betcher scored 4 goals. Cedric Toyshirt scored 5 goals. But Betcher had fewer minutes, fewer appearances. Betcher had 547 minutes. Toyshirt had 754. And so Betcher's goals per 90 was 0.66. Toyshirt's was 0.6.
Okay. I thought it was going to be even trickier. I was like, what center back or someone's like played one game and scored or something?
Well, I could have gone. I was originally going to go with expected goals, non-penalty expected goals per 90. And that would have been Caden Glover, actually, with 0.48 non-penalty expected goals per 90 because he had 54 minutes of game time in MLS play.
Wow.
Yeah. So I couldn't use that. That was a little too digging deep.
It is. Yeah, right. That would have been, no one would get that. Well done, Matt. And thank you so much to Chris Gebhardt. That was really nice of you to send those our way. And sorry, you can't make it.
Sucks. And congrats again, Colin, for guessing Tomas Ostrak as if you're just joining us, Tomas Ostrak is the longest tenured City player currently in Coachella as far as when they were announced as a signing for St. Louis City. Good stuff.
Should we start the show?
I'm ready to start the pod, Phil.
Okay. So we are, just to clarify, we're going straight into the short segment, right?
Yep.
After the intro. Great.
Yeah, I think, there's one other thing that I wanted to pull up here on our show notes. I need to delete that thing at the bottom. But then for your purposes, there you go. There's a station call for you.
Oh, no, I'm glad you clarified that.
And then all this stuff goes away.
Thank you so much for doing that.
You got it, dude.
Making room for the end. So we're going to end with the long one. Got it.
Yeah, we are.
Thank you, sir. All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone, to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We are here to talk to you about preseason magic with St. Louis City. And we have our first game that we got to watch finally. So we actually have a lot to talk about today. But as usual, we're going to start you off light. We're going to get you going with information and things like that. So, of course, Matt Baker is here to join me to do that. Matt, how's it going?
Fantastic, Phil. Excited to be here. Excited to have a match to talk about that we all saw, even if it's light on details because it's preseason. But it's an exciting time, exciting prospects ahead with a few more games. And, we've got a lot to talk about tonight between the game and some of these little news bits. We have roster rules to talk about, which, is near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited for tonight. Yeah,
let's jump right into it. We have some preseason updates. Starting with Roman Bürki. This one was a great quote from Lutz. I would say it's up there for one of his best quotes ever.
Yeah, the update on Roman Bürki after a few rumors from the last week or two. Roman Bürki, quote, will start the season with us and he will finish the season with us. It doesn't matter even if the Moon or Barcelona is interested in him. He will not leave St. Louis City this year. End quote from Lutz Pfannenstiel, sporting director of St. Louis City. And this was in response to Roman Bürki having shown interest by FC Copenhagen as their potential keeper for the back half of their season, as they, I believe they're fighting to stay out of relegation, if I recall correctly.
Oh, wild.
Anyway, I think they signed another keeper in his stead, but it was never a written offer. It was a verbal. They reached out to the team. There was never anything that even made its way to Roman Bürki because he was asked at media day about that, and he hadn't heard anything. Roman Bürki, the big takeaway I have about this, though, real quick, is what Lutz means by this when he says he will not leave St. Louis City this year. that's summer transfer window as well. Roman Bürki's contract is up at the end of the year, and Lutz did allude to negotiations taking place. So yes, the team is talking with Roman Bürki and his agent and his representatives. Nothing's agreed upon yet, but they are talking about the future beyond 25. Lutz has said firmly he will not leave this year. So Bürki is expected to be our keeper through and through. This takes off the table the potential of selling him in a Tim Parker type deal where the contract is going to expire and you want to get something for Bürki. That's my biggest takeaway is it in all practical ways right now, unless something catastrophic changes, the door is shut on Bürki leaving during the summer because of this statement.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see what kind of club was interested in him. Copenhagen is like the top team in Denmark every year, pretty much. I think they're in Champions League, though they're not going to quite make it to the next level. But that's still a high level team for Roman Bürki to go play in Europe, closer to home, closer to his culture, I imagine. So interesting opportunity. I would love to cash in, as you said, Matt. But I also love the confidence of knowing we're going to have him till the end of the year. So that's really nice for me personally. A little bit of news on people who have been injured thus far. And I've been excited to hear a little more news on this because I haven't seen it online this week.
Yeah, we heard last Friday from Lutz and Olaf's media availability during Media Day is that Chris Durkin and JGR have vastly different updates at this point right in time. We did have updates on Salio, Ostrak, and Alm, but as we're going to talk about in a few minutes, those updates are out the window. We all saw them, and so we know exactly where they are and what they're doing. Chris Durkin was out running with the team, running on his own at the end of last week, but wouldn't be more than team training in the next week or so. So the hope for Chris Durkin is that you may see him next week. I would say third and fourth Coachella games could be that closed door game against the Earthquake after Coachella. That's another opportunity, but Durkin is still targeting returning for Colorado to start the season. Jake Girdwood-Wright, though, that's a little bit up in the air at this point. And it's not, our understanding is it's not specifically injury related, but he was sick during the Florida portion of the camp. Olaf Melberg said, quote, "He's not okay," end quote. I said he was sick during the camp and it was not a great camp for him in Florida, but they're hoping to turn things around, get him ramped up and get him going. We know he had some surgical operation in the offseason to shorten or shave off a bone that was growing too large. But other than that, it's the actual health. It's the sickness as we ordinary folk think of sickness that he needs to work back from, get his stamina and build up his strength in addition to that lower body issue. So Durkin and JGR are kind of trending the opposite directions at this point. But we do have a lot of good news that we're going to talk about for a lot of the other players ahead of Coachella that we're going to talk about here in a couple segments. It's noteworthy that City did make a couple roster movements in between Florida and California. Ahead of their Wednesday, February 5th match, I did confirm with the team the statuses on the following players. Cam Silly, who we know what his status is, he's signed to City 2. He is still with the team in Coachella. He started in the first game that we'll talk about. All three super draft picks are with the club still, and homegrowns Makai Joyner and Miguel Perez are still with the club. Brendan McSorley, Caden Glover, and Tyson Pierce are all with City 2 currently as they begin their Arizona camp. So I think they're still in St. Louis now, but as they go, they're with City 2. So that's why you didn't see McSorley, Glover, or Pierce in the previous game, and you will not expect to see them anymore during Coachella unless some massive injury issues occur.
You feel for these guys. McSorley saying, like you said, Matt, that this was like a do or die year for him. But if they're going to get more minutes and that's going to help their development, that's better in the long run. I think we went round and round in our DMs on this, but trust the system is kind of what I'm trying to stick with on this one because I don't think they've steered any kids wrong at this point. So best of luck to those guys as they continue to develop and work their way to the first team. So nice to see Miggy and Joyner staying with the first team for different reasons. So something to watch there, and we'll talk a little more about that later. Now, speaking of kids, let's talk about a recent call-up to the U17s. This is someone that Stu has been talking about for a long time, and I'm dying to get my eyes on him. Matt, give us this update, if you will.
St. Louis City 2 now midfielder Lorenzo Cornelius was called up to the U17s for 3 group stage CONCACAF matches as the U.S. Youth National Team U17s vie for a spot in the FIFA U17 World Cup. The qualifying matches for the upcoming CONCACAF U17 qualifiers will be in Alajuela, Costa Rica. I'm sure I had that wrong. From February 3rd to the 16th. So he is there right now. And all three of the U.S.'s group stage matches will take place in Alajuela. So Costa Rica. The U17s will open group play on February 10th against the U.S. Virgin Islands. They'll face St. Kitts and Nevis on February 12th. And then close out group play on February 15th against Cuba. The winner of each group will qualify for the 2025 FIFA U17 World Cup in Qatar. And this is Cornelius's second call-up after earning his first in August after scoring 2 goals during the Vaclav Jezik tournament for the U17s. We talked about Cornelius recently as far as City 2 signings. He joins Emiliano Chavez as U.S. Youth National Team previous call-ups. So to see Cornelius being called up, he's listed as a forward for the U17, so that's kind of noteworthy in his role in the attack. Kind of reminiscent of Indiana Vasilev, midfielder for us, referred to as a forward as far as the U.S. goes. And so we just wish Cornelius all the best. Can't wait to see him for City 2. One of my most exciting prospects to watch for City 2, because this kid is now getting significant looks at the U.S. Youth National Team level. And it's going to be exciting to see him progress at Energizer Park in 25 for City 2.
Check out Scuffed podcast, has a great update on the U17s if you want to start digging deep into that level. It's pretty nerdy at that point, but really good stuff from Matt Harmon and his the other partner on that show. I forgot his name. Super good episode. Matt, MLS and USSF, the Soccer Federation, pardon me, versus NASL. This is something that's been developing for years and years and years, thinking massive news would come out of the end of this, and it kind of just pittered at the end here, just into nothing almost. Basically, 2 announcements from both comms departments that didn't lead to much, did it?
It really didn't. I mean, it was one of those things. If anybody's seen Sonic the Hedgehog 3, that scene towards the end where one of the Dr. Robotniks kind of just like flies off and is just whoop, cut. Like it's it. It just poof all of a sudden. And I think this was always something brewing in the background. So if you hadn't heard of this real quick. So the lawsuit was basically NASL brought about a lawsuit against US Soccer and MLS as an antitrust lawsuit, saying that they colluded to keep out competition at the D1 level. I think they even brought USL into it at one point. They were arguing at the D2 level as well, that MLS, USL, and USSF, even though USL was not a defendant in this case. And basically that US Soccer Federation wasn't evenly holding out their statuses and their requirements for Division 1, and they were showing preferential treatment to MLS. And when it came down to it this week, after having this lawsuit was what, Phil, 8 years in the making, something like that. It's been, I think 2017 is when NASL first filed the lawsuit. The case kind of just like crawled through the pandemic, and eventually it was like a $500 million lawsuit at one point. I think they lowered it to potentially 375, but that's a massive lawsuit when you're talking about the soccer landscape in the US. And it always had this, possibility of shaking everything up. If NASL could prove that US Soccer and MLS colluded to keep out competition, it could open the stage in a whole lot of different ways in US Soccer. Like the types of changes we're hearing that will occur or could occur on the college level with the semi-pro type deals, like that was the possibilities that could occur at a D1 level. But now that the jury has found on the side for US Soccer and MLS saying that NASL failed to prove any of this in any meaningful way, nothing changes. So NASL is just, they went out of business, and they brought this lawsuit because they thought they were unfairly targeted or they didn't have a fair competitive environment for US Soccer. And now they're just kind of done. I have no doubt this will be appealed. It seems like if they brought this lawsuit for long enough, they'll try some appeals. But if you've been at any point hearing about NASL lawsuits could potentially shake things up, if you're on the conspiracy side of Soccer X or Soccer Blue Sky, you probably see a lot of frustration because the conspiracy is dead at this point, and so is NASL.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to point out a couple things, because I would say that both press releases from MLS and NASL, they both kind of took a lot of credit for what they've done for soccer, the soccer landscape.
Yes.
And it's really interesting to kind of read between the lines. But, the MLS one was pretty standard, but the NASL one, and they throw random stuff out a lot. So I don't want you guys to put too much weight into this. Historically, I think that's fair to say. But, they're taking credit for U.S. soccer for getting rid of the U.S. soccer and MLS combination, taking credit for all kinds of things NASL is. And the big one for me that sounded like possibly interesting to me was, I thought in every lawsuit, the discovery, right? Discovery is like, they can dig and grab any evidence they want to and bring it to light. And I was so interested to see. I thought that collusion would be obvious at that point, but NASL is saying that the biggest problem with this lawsuit was that they weren't allowed to consider key evidence. So that's just one thought I had. I don't want to put too much time and effort into this. Just wanted to kind of point out those things that I'm glad the lawsuit happened. I'm glad all the things NASL is taking credit for. All of those things were good for U.S. soccer, the pyramid and the landscape. So we are where we are here. Maybe there will be more to come. Don't count on it necessarily, though.
Yep.
Anything else from you, Matt? Or you want to move on?
No, I'm ready to move on to the next one.
Yeah. So we need to dedicate some time to this as well. MLS roster rules. Matt, you just take it away here. And that guy, I forgot who posted that thread of just the most amazing post. Yeah.
Oh, I'm citing that. Chris Ivey, our friend with 615 Soccer in Nashville, had an amazing post. I think he has a law background, because if you follow Chris Ivey on Blue Sky especially, but also he's on X, you'll see that he not only laid out the changes to the MLS roster rules, he used legalese in highlighting red over what actually changed in the roster rules. So that's where I'm getting my sources here on the big changes. I had my own list of what I made note of, but I'm just going to run through him, and that's why I want to give Chris Ivey credit on this one. The first one is that cash for trades is now officially in the MLS roster rules. This was announced previously, but now they've incorporated into the rules, and we've already seen 3 big moves take place in MLS under this new policy. We've seen Dejan Joveljic move from the LA Galaxy to Sporting KC. We've seen Jack McGlynn move from Philadelphia Union to Houston Dynamo. And we have seen Teddy Kude-Pietro move from DC United to Colorado Rapids here just in the past few days on a U22 deal. These moves are happening in the millions of dollar ranges. We're seeing values set for these players, and now it is in the roster rules. Cash for trades does exist, the internal transfer market in MLS. And also on top of this, it does include confirmation, as we heard prior to when we talked to Henry Kessler earlier this year, that a 10% payment to the player is a part of this. So if the cash value of the trade is $1 million, then the player would get, what is $1 million? $100,000. So no problems there as far as what we had been expecting. One of the big things with this, though, is that the status of the player follows them in this trade. So a player acquired via the cash for trades and made into a designated player cannot be converted into another, like a TAM level player. So if we were to trade Roman Bürki right now and he was a DP for us, he would be a DP for them, and they can't buy him down for the length of his contract, even if his contract was for like 4 years. And he had the possibility with us, if he's traded as a DP, he stays with that DP designation. That's a pretty big one, in my opinion, Phil. And that may be where, before we get into a lot of these other rules, I think that may be the limitation that we see on this. Kude-Pietro was a U22 player for DC United going to Colorado. He remains that designation, even though Colorado paid like $1 million some for him. He gets to hold on to that U22 tag.
It is big. And doesn't it feel like maybe a little more fair? I don't know how you feel about it. Is it more fair, or is it just kind of putting the emphasis on the right spot?
I think it's fair because there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration that the Jack McGlynn trade in particular highlighted, and that's the competitive advantage now that MLS teams might have to keep players in MLS. And so this can be looked at as a good thing that he gets to keep the tag, but it can also be looked at as a restriction from a DP perspective, where maybe now you have to consider, all right, are you going to sell him outside of MLS to free up a DP slot? You might not be able to sell him inside of MLS if he's I would say a unvalued designated player. If other teams don't want that player as a DP for them, they're not going to be paying top dollar. Whereas maybe you get an extra $1 million if you move that kind of player abroad. So I think it kind of evens the scales a little bit, because Jack McGlynn, I point that out, he had offers from England and Italy as reported, but Houston made enough of a cash offer and included a 50% sell-on to the Philadelphia Union as part of this deal. The money was too sweet, and it caught Jack McGlynn's camp by surprise. So his contract is what it is. He doesn't own his contract. He goes where he's traded. And so Houston had the leverage to do that. It evens it out in a few different ways. So I think that's a good thing. One of the other rules, and before we get to that, we are Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you so much for joining us. Tune into our pod for a little extra. Tune into our YouTube for a little extra on this episode. We so glad you joined us. Thank you so much. We are digging into the MLS roster rules before looking at Coachella and the matches that we have at hand. Miami is a big benefactor of some of these roster changes. Miami, and I guess Seattle too, because they made the FIFA Club World Cup. But MLS added a specific line in the roster rules this year for the Club World Cup, which is being held in the U.S., giving the teams that have qualified for that from MLS an additional $750,000 in GAM, and letting them kind of borrow against their own GAM from the future. They can pull another $1.25 million in GAM that doesn't have to be paid back to the league until the next year or two, in Chris Ivy's words, after Messi's contract expires. So that's a fascinating change, and I like it in the sense that it makes it more competitive for those teams in that tournament. I don't like it because it creates a little bit of an imbalance in the domestic league. It gives them an advantage in MLS. So that's where I'm not a huge fan. But of course, Miami getting preferential treatment is nothing new.
Dirty as heck. And again, Miami on top of that. I mean, that one's hard to take. Especially, putting the Open Cup kind of down in that way over and over and over again. It feels like they kind of wanted to slip that in there I don't know. It is what it is. Go ahead and keep going, Matt, because I have nothing good to say about that one.
The good thing, though, that we can look at is that the roster sizes were increased. This is going to fly under the radar for a lot of people, but I want to be very clear about what this is. Current MLS rosters are up to 30 players. There's 20 on the senior roster, 10 on the supplemental. Only the senior roster counts against the salary cap. So that's why supplemental roster slots are important as a distinction. The supplemental roster has gone from 10 slots to 11, meaning that MLS has implemented a slot 31, but it's basically going to be exclusively used with homegrown or other types of players that are loaned to second-tier teams in the U.S. or Canada. Chris points out MLS Next Pro affiliates can be part of this, but also the way the roster rules read, it can be for USL or CPL teams. Canadian Premier League or USL second division. This is big for a guy like Tyson Pierce. The point of this slot isn't that you get this extra slot to plug somebody. It's that you get an unlimited number of call-ups, basically. So the MLS team can call you back up, unlike they normally would have been able to do when you're on loan. So Miguel Perez, and let me back up, not unlimited, but you can call a player back up as a short-term call-up. So it doesn't count against their loan, basically. So Miguel Perez, this is the example, and this is why the slot 31 is important. Miguel Perez could have been put in slot 31, doesn't count on any of the first 30 slots, so he's off roster. He doesn't take up any of the roster slots. We have a freed-up roster slot. But he's on loan to Birmingham. So we can't recall him unless we're willing to end his loan and recall him for the full season. Under this new rule, a guy like Miguel Perez last year can be called back any of those 4 short-term call-ups that like Brendan McSorley was last year. So he can appear in up to 2 MLS games. He can appear in 2 other non-league games. And we have that flexibility that we can arrange the loans with. So be on the lookout if we were to loan a player out to a second division team in US or Canada, or if we have this Tyson Pierce type designation of an off-roster homegrown. That's what this slot is for. And it lets us pull them back in for cup competitions or, other things injury related that we might need. Just a little bit of extra flexibility for a younger player.
Yeah, I got overly excited about that one, but it'll be really useful for that one player. And I kind of hope it's Pierce, honestly. If we send Pierce down, it could be someone else sent down. But on being able to use them as much as you want with all these cup competitions and as many call-ups as you want, that's really nice. It is helpful. It is, and there's 2 distinctions here. So there's this slot 31, but there's also a separate designation called off-roster homegrown players. And we had mentioned this when we talked about what the roster rules were. Remember, Phil, this is the one, the off-roster homegrown. This is the Tyson Pierce. This is
He's
So
on
this is
loan.
different than the 31 roster
Yes.
spot. I need to read up better with that.
You can have an off roster homegrown in the 31 slot, but you don't need to. It kind of gives you that extra flexibility of saying, we're going to have a Tyson Pierce go down to City 2, your own affiliate, for the entire year. He's off our roster. He's a homegrown player. And this specific designation lets you recall that player to any number of cup competitions you want. You can also call him up to short-term call-ups in up to 6 MLS league season matches. This is a big opportunity to say, we want to give you the full season. You're a homegrown player. You're going to play for our second team, but we can pull you up a whole lot more than we were able to previously. So that's a benefit to a guy like Tyson Pierce, whoever that ends up being this year.
So does that mean we can have a roster slot number 31 and an off roster homegrown? Can we use both? Okay.
Yes.
That's two. That's not just one like I thought. That's great.
Basically, yes. Basically.
That's better. That's one better. I'll give it one better.
Yeah. The last few things we'll run here really quick because I want to get to City. The summer transfer window has been pushed back a week, aligning with the European transfer market. But the downside is that and we'll touch on this later this year, anybody we bring in the summer is going to have less availability in the MLS regular season. That's the biggest thing. So we had like 10 games where they could compete last year, the one before Leagues Cup and then after. It's probably going to look like 8 or so by the time we have any summer signings at the most. And then the roster construction model can be changed. Roster construction meaning you have 3 designated players and 3 U22s, or you have 2 DPs and 4 U22s plus $2 million in GAM. You can change which one you go with because you have to lock it in when the season starts, change it in the summer window. So for St. Louis City, if we find another U22 or 2, we can shift from the DP model that we're probably going to start with to the U22 as needed. Gives teams flexibility in what they're signing on the summer window.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Bürki left at the end of the season, what the next model would be. Has he been bought down? He's been bought down, so he's not.
He has not officially been bought down. He is still a third DP, but he's max TAM, so he can be. He gives us that flexibility.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that all of them?
That's all. Let's shift gears to Coachella again.
Ooh, I just wanted to say one thing about all these. I didn't say it earlier. I didn't know how to respond. It came to me so fast there. But I do think like a good measurement of all of those are like, what does the rest of the world do? How close is this to the rest of world soccer, this new rule that they've implemented? And I've been really hoping for a cash market for a very long time.
It's a big one.
And I'm glad it happened. I didn't think it would happen this season. But I think it's really healthy for the league. Less single entity, right? That's a good thing too.
It is.
So that's really cool. And then, you get to the Miami rule. That's nothing like the rest of world soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to borrow the GAM and making it because of Leagues Cup, which is most countries don't have a Leagues Cup. They have an Open Cup. So a type of thing. So, some stuff and a good way to kind of judge it is to kind of look around at the rest of the world for, whether you think it's good for maybe the soccer landscape. I will, of course, take arguments saying this is good for MLS. You're probably right. So yeah, I will concede that. Cool. Sorry. Thanks for letting me get that in there, Matt. But we can move on now. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We're going to talk about the Coachella friendly, the first one we got to see and watch. Matt, you and I probably broke down every darn thing there was to break down in our minds. We're going to talk about as many as we can fit in here. But as usual, we should start with the starting 11.
You're going to have to keep me on track for this one, Phil, because I could go for a while on a meaningless preseason game. The reason that we are going to go into this game and dissect it a bit is because we saw so many things that we expect to carry forward as far as tactics, as far as formations, from things that we had heard about in Florida and then we saw confirmed at Coachella. So the starting 11 against Real Salt Lake for St. Louis City saw Roman Bürki in net, Joachim Nilsson, Michael Wenzel, and Josh Arrow as a back 3 center back look. Conrad Vollum, Akil Watts, Cam Silly, Indiana Vasilev, and Kyle Hebert made up a wide midfield 5, and Klaus and Betcher were our 2 forwards. It's important the way I listed that because I saw it very much as a 3-5-2 on offense and a 5-3-2-ish in defense. We definitely dropped back in a 5-man backline when we did not have the ball. And it was Conrad Vollum and Kyle Hebert on the wings. Hebert was so far up at times that he was in fact called for an offside early on in the game, which I don't know if I've ever seen Kyle Hiebert called offside. And
That was funny.
that was the comical moment for me. But the fluidity in the midfield is one thing that I found fascinating. And we saw it early with Cam Silly. So you could call it a 3-5-2, and you should when we have the ball. Conrad Vollum and Kyle Hiebert were pushing up very wide on both wings. But the midfield was one of the more fascinating and kind of questionable things to me. I thought we had good ball movement at times, and we never really broke the St. Louis City style of trying to get the ball up as fast as possible and getting it into the attacking third and trying to do something very quick to goal. Oftentimes we would take shots that were from distance, even though we could have played it around a little bit and try to possess. We didn't do anything of the like. So don't expect any fundamental changes. But the way this formation broke down, we had massive holes in the midfield for huge amounts of time. And on defense, this caused an issue in the second half. I think this was one of the things that led directly to goal, whether it was on offense with the ball or on defense in transition or otherwise. We had a pretty stout back line. I thought that our back line was deep, and they remained deep enough behind the ball that they were never at huge risk of line breaking moves. So I thought that was good. But the spacing between the back line and the midfield at this point in the first half, it was of Akil Watts, Indiana Vassilev, and Cam Silly. That was questionable. I felt like they were still trying to find their feet in where they needed to be because of where the wingbacks were. And at times you had Akil Watts and Indiana Vassilev so far wide that Cam Silly was basically playing a 6 and a 10 nonstop. Like, it wasn't just the box-to-box 8 that we talk about. He was he was being asked to do everything. And then when we were on defense, he at times would push up into that front line to a front 3, but he would just as often fall back in between Akil and Indy. So there's a lot of fluidity that occurred in that central, you could call it central attacking midfield spot that Silly occupied. I kind of want to see if Marcel Hartl occupies that when we next see him. But the subs, I'll go through what the subs were, and then I'll turn it over to you, Phil. The subs never changed anything. That was a big thing for me. We saw some halftime subs. We saw 55 minutes, 72. The subs themselves were very noteworthy, but their positioning on the field never changed anything. This is another big takeaway for me, is that we never flipped into a 4-man backline because of the personnel on the field.
Yeah.
We remained firm and consistent with a wingback system, 3 center backs. And at halftime, we saw Ben Luke come in for Roman Bürki. We saw Timo Baumgartel come in for Joachim Nilsson right there on that back line. We saw Joey Zielinski come in for Kyle Hiebert, that right wing back, Makai Joyner for Conrad Vollum at left wing back, and Emil Jääskeläinen for Simon Betcher up front alongside Klaus. And then at 55 minutes, we saw probably the most exciting set of subs that we are going to see this spring, because we saw Tomas Ostrak and Celio Pompeu make their triumphant returns for St. Louis City. Could not describe the smile on my face when I saw them enter, because they didn't get billed at first. It was kind of I think you heard the announcers say something about subs, or we might see some subs, and all of a sudden they're just on the field. And you realize, hold up, that's Tomas Ostrak with the number 7 there tracking back with the ball in the corner. And he's actually winning the ball against 3 defenders. The movement right as soon as he entered was phenomenal. Anyway, 55 minutes, Tomas Ostrak came in for Indiana Vassilev, and Miguel Perez came in for Akil Watts at that midfield role, the double pivot or the back 2 of that 3-man midfield. And then Celio Pompeu came in for Klaus. So Pompeu playing up front with Emil Jääskeläinen at this point. And then at 72 minutes, our dreams were further coming true as Rasmus Alm made his debut in the preseason, coming in for Cam Silly, and Alm occupied that central attacking midfield role. So Celio and Emil Jääskeläinen really didn't change where they were. Rasmus Alm took a central role, which is just fascinating for a lot of reasons for me, Phil.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I'm going to back all the way up and then maybe work through the whole game. Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure where to go from there, but I think that's the best way to start. And yeah, Matt, I noticed, that we were back heavy and top heavy, just like you were mentioning, that the midfield was seemingly far away from in the buildup. That buildup wasn't super smooth. However, I was really happy with the press. And, to zoom out just a little bit, overall, in the first half, I thought the defense was like bend but don't break. A lot of corners. But the first half, no goals were given up. And I thought the center back should be proud of what they did in that half. For the most part, I might have missed it. I was working while I was doing this. Looking at the pressing, there were a couple turnovers that created some of the best chances for St. Louis. So pressing is still going to be part of their identity. And to me, that was my favorite thing is getting those two things solidified early in the season. In season 1, we saw the pressing was what we got all of our production from early on, and teams just weren't ready for it. And a lot of the excuse was teams aren't good at passing early in the season. Okay, great. So let's hold on to that pressing idea early in the season. Let's solidify the defense was maybe a problem at the end of last season. I love that motive. And then we have all season to peak at the right time to get that beautiful game going with Hartle and Leuven, who also didn't play in this game. So that's another thing to take note there. But yeah, I noticed that in pressing, I think you're right about the formations, but I do think Indy was dropping in at kind of a 10 with 2 strikers. And I think we're going to see if Indy's not in, maybe Hartle is there, because Indy was all over the place. And I really liked Indy was really available for the ball, as was Watts. Both of those guys were bailing people out when they were in trouble. But Indy got on the ball a lot. He took a leadership role, wanted the ball. I loved that. But we got to build up a way to get him to be productive with that. So I hope that's something that develops with either the tactics or Indy himself or both.
Yeah.
So looks like you have something to say about that.
Well, on Indy, it reminds me that our midfielders were actually given a lot of freedom, but it all started from the back line to me, because I noticed so many times that we had the ball, our back line didn't remain horizontal. Our back three, you had at some points, Joachim Nilsson was taking the ball into the midfield. Timo Baumgartel did the same thing in the second half a couple times, but you had
I remember the announcer saying Nilsson on the overlap. So that was like, okay, interesting.
Yes. But I think that worked because the midfielders had the spacing where they were either wide or they were pushed up. And so you had some center backs taking the space that they were afforded. And that was kind of cool to see, because because it showed me that there's flexibility behind this mindset, where just because you call it a 3 center back look doesn't mean those 3 center backs are going to play deep and wide as the kind of a true back 3 the entire time, like keeping the ball in front of you. Sometimes they're going to carry the ball up themselves. Sometimes they're going to make sure that one of them is back to make sure that they aren't going to be taken advantage of. But you're allowing that freedom to do what you need to with the ball and take the space given. And when that happens, you do have your midfielders move up. Indy moved up a lot as a result, just to find that space. And that's kind of a cool idea, that your midfield isn't stagnant, your backline isn't stagnant based on where your positioning is, but there's this flexibility that accompanies it. With the wingers so wide, there is going to be so much space in the midfield from the 6 all the way to the 10. And to see the fluidity work, that was really cool. And I'm excited to see how that progresses when you introduce potentially higher level players like Hartle and Toyshirt. When Henry Kessler joins the mix, see what he does at center back. But the spacing with the center backs and the midfield 3 is going to be a core thing that I hope to see get developed better and better.
Yeah, and our center backs enjoy the ball at their feet. If Hebert isn't being asked to play a wingback role, perhaps he can be very comfortable as an outside center back, and I think he will look good in that role.
Yep.
So yeah, we need the center backs to be able to move and be helpful in the attack. Sometimes 3 in the back can be a handicap if they're not capable of that. So
yeah,
good stuff. Watts, free kicks over Indy. That was fun. And then, and he did a great job. I think he deserved to take it over Indy in some cases. No hate on Indy's free kicks, but I thought Watts did a great job. And then Matt, what do you think about Vollum before we talk about the second half?
Oh, Vollum's goal. We can't skip over Vollum's goal in the first half. The 37-minute Conrad Vollum scored the goal as much as anybody can score a goal in preseason. Yeah, it was an own goal. Yeah, it was headed into the own net, but Vollum put it where it needed to be. He touched it with his foot, with his body, with his head. And the spacing, again, Conrad Vollum taking the space given to him and being not afraid to dribble inside the box from that left wing position. The ball was laid off to him, I think, by Klaus, but it was laid off to him by one of our forwards. And he just took that ball and he ran with it. He tried to beat defenders. So it tells me that our wing backs aren't going to have to stay wide if they see an opportunity. It gives that overlapping look that you can kind of have over your midfielders. And so the spacing in the fluid movement of an attack, when we get the ball into the final third, it's kind of the players will do what they need to do and play off of each other to give and take space. By give, I mean, if Conrad Volum's cutting in, then somebody in the midfield is going to cede that space, and you're going to occupy somewhere else. You're going to go out wide. You're going to drop back a little bit. You're going to let Volum do what he needs, and you're going to try to get yourself freed up. That was pretty cool to see, and it worked. The skill of Conrad Volum was on full display there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting as his debut, one of the 4 players to debut. I mentioned the other 3 were due to injury and his first appearance on Ulm, but Volum's first appearance wearing the number 6 was just as exciting as anything else. And I thought this was just a fantastic look at what he's capable of on that left wingback side, but also what the City attack is capable of in the final third using these wingbacks.
Yeah, we saw the quality of he had created his own space. One bad touch let him down, but later in the season that might look quite good. Inverted wingbacks, everybody. Who knew?
Could be a thing. Could be a thing.
Second half. What did you think about the second half, Matt?
Second half, that's when the subs obviously started coming in. I thought RSL definitely was on the front foot on this one. We didn't have much that was consistent. We had a few moments. I thought Mackay Joyner had a few nice passes. I thought he showed a lot of strength and physicality on the left side. Mackay Joyner is a wingback, is a work in progress. I think defensively, he's got some things to work on. There's a lot more exciting in the attack from him.
Mm-hmm.
And then just seeing the different look that the guys had in the midfield. After you have Tomas Ostrak, you have Miguel Perez, and then you have Rasmus Alm in the midfield. And whether they're just not used to those roles yet because it's their first time, save for Miguel Perez, first time Ostrak's been out there, first time Alm's been out there, I buy them all the slack and all the grace in the world for figuring out what they need to. Because like I mentioned earlier, when this back 5 drops back deep when the other team is in possession and they're trying to work the ball around, it's going to be up to your midfielders to keep the space occupied around that 18-yard box, the edge of the box, and allowing people to enter that box. That's going to be a midfield role. And so you have Tomas Ostrak, you have Miguel Perez at that point needing to figure it out. And I think at times we didn't. And that's why you ended up having the goal by RSL, was they took space at the top of the box in the 15, 18-yard range because our back line was so deep towards goal. The spacing is going to take some figuring out just as much as the responsibilities of the midfield in this new look.
Yeah. I think Joyner was like a plus in the attack, and then a definite negative in defending. It's new to him, no big deal. I'm not at all worried. I was really impressed with one move he made where he was on the break, had some options, but he slowed down, made a move to draw a defender in before he sent, I believe, Celio in behind. And that might have been that shot that Celio had, actually.
It was.
So, boy, that was so mature to slow down, draw the defender in, and that just opened up Celio. So really smart play from him. I think we'll take the plus and the minus, though.
Yeah.
We do hope the defending improves throughout the season if that is a thing he's asked to do. And it's asking a lot of a guy like him who darn near got the golden boot in City 2 last year. So
that's right.
Okay. So the other thing was, learning their positions. The goal was kind of Joyner messing up defense and then Ostrak coming over to help him out. And, it just happened. I don't think the goal is something to worry about too much, but I love that you touched on responsibilities and spacing and that kind of thing. I think the goal kind of showed that. No big deal there. Yeah. The only thing that bothered me was the buildup was horrendous in the second half. And so that is going to take some work. And then this is, I think, a good time to say, this game had some starters and some backups, some people that are hybrid in-betweeners. And so this isn't something to worry too much about, but I think it showed us in some ways, to be positive about it, how good guys like Horn and Totland are in the buildup, how vital they are. I think we saw Lund kick the ball to the wings and he was very accurate, but the ball just never landed to someone's feet. And so I think with Totland and Horn in there, we're going to be able to do some better build up. Guys that are used to being under pressure, building the ball from the back. And of course, Leuven Durkin. These are guys that are good under pressure as well. So I just wanted to say that it was horrendous buildup in the second half, especially toward the end. But we got to remember all the negatives from this game. This is a hybrid of different levels of players.
Oh, yeah. And it's the third preseason game, so you've got that going for you. The roster that we played in this game, in the second half especially, where you saw the slight, if not big, change in who controlled the game. The second half consisted of guys making their very first appearance in all of preseason, in Ostrak, in Alm, and Celio Pompeu. And it also had Jaskalenin and Celio leading the line in the attack. You had Rasmus Alm as the center attacking mid in his first debut in this game. So many guys, not just figuring out the new formation, but the dip in experience so far in preseason, as well as the fact that you had so many guys that we're about to touch on, I think, not play. You mentioned Leuven, Totland, and Horn. Well, Leuven, Totland, Horn, Henry Kessler, and Marcel Hartl all didn't play. 5 presumed starters of the 10 men in the outfield were not playing. And you could argue that these are 5 of the most important players to the issues that we had just described. Midfield positioning, wingback buildup, all of those things where you presume to have Thomas Totland as one of your wingbacks. You presume to have Edu Leuven, Marcel Hartl as your midfielders, and then your center backs there with Kessler and probably Horn at left center. Like, that's my presumption, but we expect to see them on Saturday. So there are games coming out. If you're listening to us on the weekend or to start this next week, you're already understanding this point that we have 4 matches in 11 days here at Coachella. 3 matches for Coachella, 1 closed door friendly with San Jose on the 15th. But 4 matches in 11 days. You're going to rest some of these guys. You have a full, deep roster now that you need to get minutes. And so you're going to see roster turnover on this next game. And then maybe you'll have Joyner and Perez and all those guys back the third game, and then the friendly, who knows. But the formation is a huge takeaway. The specific players who didn't play was a big takeaway on Wednesdays that we expect to see on the weekend. And
Matt, you have a graphic. If we want to fit it in, now's the time.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So if you're watching us on the live stream, you get a little peek at this. I'll talk it through for those listening on the podcast. I threw up a depth chart of what a 3-5-2 would look like with every single player that we have on the roster right now. And it's healthy. The only player who's really not healthy that we're worried about is JGR, because we don't know his status, but we expect Durkin to be available. To me, I'm going to list some names out real quick. Think of if you're listening to this on the Big 550 or on your podcast, close your eyes for a second and think of these players as coming off the bench in an MLS match. Think of Simon Betcher. Think of Rasmus Alm. Think of Indiana Vasilev, Tomas Ostrak, Jake Girdwood-Reich, Celio Pompeu, Giannis Horn, Josh Yarrow, Ben Lunt, and let's just say Kyle Hebert. Okay, that's 10 guys. That's more guys than we would be able to fill a bench with. Those would be your bench options, because your starters, to me, your presumed starters at this point, and the center backs will go different ways. It could change. Health could change. I've got these as presumed starters based on this system. From a back 3, Nielsen, Baumgartel, Kessler. You've got Giannis Horn back there. There's lots of different options that you could have at the center back role. Left wing back, Conrad Vollum. Right wing back, Thomas Totland. Your 3 midfielders in this look would be Edu Leuven, Marcel Hartl, and Chris Durkin. And then your strikers would be Klaus and Teuscher. That's a massive starting 11 with tremendous depth that we could probably ideally hope to start with in 2024. So I think this has all of the promise in the world. So when we're talking about all these positives and negatives and things to work on and new formations, the depth is there to make this roster work and to have exciting options in the second half of games like Betcher, Alm, Vasilev, Ostrak, JGR. I don't think I mentioned Celio, Joey Zielinski if he makes the team. Giannis Horn would be a bench option in this case behind Nielsen, Baumgartel, Kessler. The rotation is just ripe for keeping guys healthy through this entire season. So just exciting as I put this together and think about the options we have in this formation and the ability to keep guys healthy and push each other as the season goes. Will Vasilev always be that odd man out? Will he push Durkin? Will he push Wallem? Or, anybody could lose their spot at any point in this, the way this breaks down with the quality of guys that we have coming off the bench.
Totally agree. And I do want to say, because I've been overemphasizing this, looking at how the guys were running last night, I know that Olaf was saying that, he wants guys that are in it 90 minutes straight. We want lots of sprinting.
Mm-hmm.
We need the guys to be in good shape so that they can pull off our style of play.
Yep.
The guys weren't going insane yesterday, and maybe that's a preseason thing, but it does seem sustainable. I've been overdoing, like, can they last a whole season? So if it looks like this, I'm not terribly worried. But sure, it looked great. So good to see the guys. So good to see 3 in the back working in real life. Maybe we'll see 4 in the next one. What do you think, Matt?
I would be surprised at this point. Lutz had told us last week at Media Day that we used the 3 center back look in both of the first 2 games. So I'm optimistic that this is going to be our new formation and we're going to stick with it, as opposed to trying to mix and match. I think you build off of a foundation and you have the ability to move depending on personnel on the field.
Interesting. I was betting that we'd use the 4-2-3-1 quite a bit too. So you're usually right, but I'm just going to throw that out there.
I like when, so you and I do best when we differ in our opinions.
I agree. Yeah.
So now we've got bragging rights on the line for this Saturday match against Austin FC, which is a good reminder as we get ready to run out here, Phil, that the next Coachella match, Saturday, February 8th against Austin. We've got Wednesday, February 12th against NYCFC, and then a closed door friendly on Saturday, February 15th against the San Jose Earthquake before the team travels back to be at the City Alive event on February 16th.
Good stuff, Matt. Thank you all for listening to us. I hope you guys, if you chimed in with the live chat and you listened to the trivia this morning, at the beginning with the giveaway and everything, hope you enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. Please do join us live on Thursday nights if you'd like. Otherwise, we all, of course, appreciate you joining us on the big 550 KTRS. We're Flyover Footy, talking about St. Louis soccer, preseason for St. Louis City. Hope you enjoyed it. Much more to come.
And don't forget to join us on February 20th at Blue Jay Brewing, 7 p.m. for our live pod that kicks off the season.
That's it, guys. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Cool. We're out.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining the stream. I really appreciate it. And I think we're going to have to really think long and hard about opening our streams now with a little trivia. It's a pretty legit thing. I might have to dig deep as the season goes on, but a mix of stats and just historical facts about City. We're in year 3. We can start calling them historical facts, right?
There you go. I like that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. We're going to end the stream. Thanks so much for sticking with us tonight, guys. We'll be there cheering along City on Saturday. So tell your friends about Flyover Footy. If people aren't downloading it or haven't listened to us, we love doing this. We're planning on doing it multiple times every week during the season. And we're just so happy to be back.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us.